Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ingenious Talks Online, recording historic sites from home, developing a collaborative learning approach for architectural conservation and sustainability. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Laura Kilpatrick, and I'll be serving as the moderator for today's event. While we meet today on a virtual platform, we would like to acknowledge the Algonquin Nation, whose traditional and unceded territory we are gathered upon today. We do this to reaffirm our commitment and responsibility in improving relationships between nations and to improving our own understanding of local Indigenous peoples and their cultures. Together, please consider how we are and can, in our own way, try to move forward in a spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. So now we'll go through a few housekeeping items. So this is a Zoom webinar, which means that all attendee microphones and videos have been automatically disabled. However, there is the option to ask a question by typing in the Q&A box on your screen. While questions will be answered at the conclusion of the presentation, we highly encourage that you type them as they come to mind into the Q&A box on your screen. So you do not need to wait until the question and answer period to submit your questions. We'll try to get to as many questions as possible, but please be mindful with the high volume of questions, we cannot guarantee that all will be answered. You may also type into the chat box on your screen to talk amongst each other and share ideas. Finally, a brief survey will appear on screen at the conclusion of the webinar. And if you have the time, we'd really appreciate if you could fill it out. We welcome and appreciate your feedback, and all answers are anonymous. Now I'm pleased to introduce to you our presenter, Dr. Mario Santana. Dr. Santana is a professor in architectural conservation and sustainability with Carleton's Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering, and director of the NSERC CREATE program, engineering students supporting heritage and sustainability, based at the Carleton Immersive Media Studio Lab. He is a guest professor at the Raymond Lemaire International Center for Conservation at the University of Leuven, and has also recently taught at the Central University of Venezuela, University of Guadalajara, and the University of Cuenca. Along with his academic activities, Dr. Santana serves as the Secretary General of the International Council of Monuments and Sites, and he's the former president of the International Council of Monuments and Sites Scientific Committee on Heritage Documentation. He's also collaborated on several international projects in heritage documentation. Today, Dr. Santana will discuss his work on recording historic sites from home, developing a collaborative learning approach for architectural conservation and sustainability. Thank you, Dr. Santana, for joining us today. And now I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you very much, Laura, for this kind introduction. And also I would like to thank Adam and Alex for putting everything together, and also to the Faculty of Engineering and Design for inviting me to talk today to you. And I hope that everyone finds my presentation useful and thoughtful about what we are all confronted with, the pandemic and the consequent lockdowns and activities. I have just put a poll that you guys can access by clicking on the chat box, and you will get this kind of platform. Oh, okay. Oh, everybody knows already how to use poll everywhere. So here we can see where everybody is connecting. We just want to get an idea where people are connected from. So it will be really cool if you, oh, wow, people from Chile. Wow, thank you. Welcome. Kingston, Ottawa, Cincoe. Wow. Very nice, very nice. Okay. Calgary. Wow, Quebec. So we have a very, very broad audience attending this webinar. I hope that is really to your interest. Oh, Jordan. Yes, I see one of my students is coming actually from Jordan, and I have very good friends in Chile and elsewhere, Hamilton, Aurora. Great, great. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to go to the next question, and thank you for your answers. And let me activate this one. So when you hear heritage, what do you think? I mean, heritage, so I do a lot of historic site recording. We work on cultural heritage. What would you say to me, okay, yes, Ottawa, heritage, culture. Yeah, so we're going to be talking about culture, about the preservation of this culture. We're going to be talking about community, history, etc. During my presentation, you're going to see ancient, oh, thank you, all buildings, tradition, architecture, excellent, excellent, courses. So yes, so I'm going to be talking about how we use courses to record historic buildings in general, okay? And I'm going to tell you a little bit about my experience over the last almost 2 years of lockdowns. Okay, so the next question is, what means digital documentation of cultural heritage? If you guys have ever had an experience, documentation for conservation of assets, yes. Documentation for preparing a virtual tour to access the sites remotely. Documentation to make a digital posterity record to upkeep the site, or to have fun and learn about cultural heritage. So actually, this is a kind of tricky. Oh, hi, Juan. Thank you. Any human activity, not strictly biological. That's a really good definition. So actually, this is a tricky question because I tell my students that answers A to D are correct. And actually, D is really important because the class that I teach, the students need to have fun by collecting information. And I think this is really important because it's the way to engage them in the field and motivate students to work on cultural heritage. I think that that's really important, but also to record and collect information. So what would you like to learn today? Do you have any expectations from this short lecture of half an hour about this topic? And that will give me an idea if I need to go one way or the other. I have prepared a number of slides. I'm gonna go quickly over those slides as to keep the time and get some questions, okay? But I will be showing you a lot of ideas. I have to say that I was working on the presentation until this morning because I was saying, oh, I should mention this, oh, I should mention that. Okay, heritage, documentation, technology, yes, we're going to talk about that. Yes, so I'm going to talk about some of the projects. That's what Juan is asking. Although I will skip a little bit projects, I will be talking about mostly about teaching, technology options, documentation. Yes, so these are all very good answers. All right, so let's go to our last question, okay? And this one is also really important. How many online meetings or activities did you attended already this week? Did you attended 0 activities, 1, 2, 3 or more, or don't want to think about it? So I have attended over 10 meetings this week. Arthur attended, oh, I see that many people don't want to think about it. Yes, I have had so many meetings, and these so many meetings have been really, I mean, some of them have been interested. I was this morning connected to the International Committee on Training for NICOMOS, and we have 70 people from the entire world, educators in actually my field in heritage conservation. So I mean, meetings are really cool, but of course, Zoom or Microsoft Teams has taken over our lives, right? Okay, thank you so much for all your answers. And now I will stop sharing and I'm going to go to my presentation. And I see some delay in my video. I apologize for that. I hope that the audio is going well. If the audio is not going well, I will ask my panelists, fellows to just to let me know. All right. So I am talking on behalf of Carleton University, but also of the Carleton Immersive Media Studio, which is an independent research lab. And our director, Professor Stephen Fay, and my colleagues work in different areas of research, engaging with technology and cultural heritage. In our lab, we work on digitalization. We work on building information modeling. We work on simulation. We work on storytelling using digital means, and we also work on the use of digitally assisted repairs, so rehabilitation of sites. So we engage with technology to understand, the aspects of heritage and so on. and see how technology can provide information for the preservation of sites. We have, from my case, I work in many international projects, and with SIMS, we have been in all these places for the last 9 years, and we have collaborated with many organizations, but one in particular, the Getty Conservation Institute, is one of our major associates in many research projects across the world recording historic sites. Usually we travel with our equipment and students, graduate students and undergrad students, and we record sites. So here you see some pictures from different places, Nepal, Belgium, and Myanmar. Here we see some of the instrumentation we use, laser scanners, total stations, differential GPS. We have also collaborated with other institutions such as Princeton. Here you see a non-destructive radar device to understand the foundation of this temple, and photogrammetry of the Tomb of Nefertari, etc. So very cool projects in general, but they all require, physical activity and recording. So actually the pandemic has been a big hit for us because we have been mostly working now in processing rather than working on collecting data. So let's talk a little bit about records for heritage conservation. Historic places, so there is this dual concept of significance and integrity. So we need to know what is valuable of a site to be able to record it. And we also need to know the condition of those assets. Historic places are defined by what we call character defining elements, like the masonry of the walls, like the structural, the envelope of the historic building, the associated traditions and history. And we need to try to conserve, to manage the change that can gradually happen by development and so on in the future. So basically, we're always talking about understanding the significance on sites, but we as architects and engineers, we worked on understanding the condition and the performance of those sites. So as I said, conservation is all about managing change, and that change can come from different areas. But in conservation, we always acknowledge the contribution of the past, we look at the present, and we look at the future, managing that change. To do that, in particular in my work, we make heritage records. And a heritage record is basically a technical dossier which has the basic data for the conservation and the monitoring activities, and also as a posterity record of that particular site. And we produce 3D models, measure drawings, animations, etc. We utilize the digital heritage recording, which is all the types of digital data to capture information about sites. And then we train in our School of Carleton and elsewhere, we train those the heritage recording specialists. And we train our students on how to use different equipments to collect that information of the sites to understand the condition and the performance. So a heritage recording specialist is the one person that can utilize these devices to acquire correct information that can inform the process of conservation. So to do that, we use a workflow. In this workflow, we plan our work, we acquire the data, we process with some software, and then we produce an information system, we produce PDFs, we can make performance simulation, structural simulations, and we also archive the data. And that's what we call the digital workflow. Traditionally, we work in the field, and here you can see working with some of my students, collecting information about sites in Ottawa, Edmonton, and in Myanmar. So when we teach historic site recording, we teach how to collect the data, traditionally speaking, how to process the data at the computer lab or home, how to produce the deliverables or the assignments, and then make a final report. These are some examples. So we asked them to create an integrated project dossier. We asked them to make measure drawings. But it's been a very difficult year. And actually, I wanted to show you these pictures. Every year, I go to Belgium, to my alma mater in the University of Leuven, and we teach a one-week workshop on documentation. And last year, because of the COVID, the students were in Belgium, I was in Canada, my colleagues that teach in this course were in their own countries, and we connected with the teams using Zoom. And then we saw their presentations. We had some of our colleagues our Belgian colleagues were in Belgium teaching, and we were helping. This was a very difficult situation because we do this physical activity, right? And we engage with the students, and in this case, we couldn't really have a strong relation. But we were reluctant to give up, and we tried our best. In the early winter, I asked my students what they thought about the most challenging in distance learning, and I got this feedback also for a poll everywhere. You can see lack of interaction, working with peers, motivation, balancing time, human fatigue, help, feeling, seeking academics, being in start, loneliness, inconsistent. So we all know what working from home means. It's not ideal. We need to find a balance between what is teaching in class and what is also could be teach at home, right? Because I think that we cannot go back to the past. So let me talk about a little bit what I have been doing for the historical recording and assessment teaching, how we transform to accommodate the students accessing the course from home. So basically, we concentrated, so we did the planning and acquisition with interns over the spring and the summer, and then we had a blended and focused course on the processing and dissemination. I developed with my TAs and colleagues about 60 hours of video lectures, tutorials, and synchronized sessions. We turned a hands-on course into an accessing from home learning experience. We shift to a blended approach. Lectures were available online all the time. All the data sets were collected from processing, and the interactions with the students was done only online, and they were all had to work from home. So here you see some pictures of what we did in the spring. We went out, I had about 2-3 interns and some colleagues, and we did laser scanning. We used the drone to collect photograph. We used cameras to collect photograph. And then and here you can see one small time lapse of me collecting data of the Bytown Museum in the fall of last year. So I was here by myself. I didn't bring any interns. I took all the measurements for the students, and then I put all the data online. And well, it was pretty cool to be on my own, but I have to say that I really missed those days with working with my graduate students and so on. And this one, actually, this project was for my capstone students, so the 4th year engineering students, because I was missing some data for them, so I went and collected for their capstone project. Here you see also another example of the Lock Master's house in Jones Falls. This is Hannah, one of my interns, and she was working in the 3D scanner where I was flying the drone, and we were using the total station to take points. So we were using these tools. Then we produce the following data set. We produce images in JPEG format for the students to process. We produce 3-dimensional scanning data, panoramic photography, some context images, and another data relevant. We store all the data in a system called Dataverse. Dataverse is provided by the university, Carleton University and most Ontario universities, and you can put there your research data, and then you can lock it and give permission to specific people to download the data. So we classify the data, we put it there, and now students are able to download the data to do their processing. And then by the end of this year's course, they will be uploading the data back into Dataverse, given that data collected from those sites will be available for posterity for other types of courses and research. This is one example of one of the data we collected this summer. So this is a Chief William Commanda Bridge and the Pump House ruins in between Ottawa and Gatineau. And here we were helped by some colleagues actually from the government. They flew a professional drone and got some images from us. This is kind of the image showing the data that we collected. And I actually have one of my capstone projects is working on the rehabilitation of the bridge. And then here is the description of the data set, where the data set is located. We also have contacts with the local stakeholders and site custodians, so the teams can also work with them and collaborate virtually. Here is the media space of Carleton. There, all the lectures for the students are available. Not only lectures, also tutorials are all available ahead of time, and then we meet once a week to go over the data. We adapted the assignments. The digital photography was difficult to adapt. We asked the students to do digital photography in their proximities, and we taught them how to do it. For the measure drawings, we asked them to produce elevation drawings, so basically just that. And then some students use a Sketchfab for 3D models. This is an example of one of the assignments that we did. This is for another course actually that I did. I was teaching Palestinian students this summer too, along with my courses in Carleton. And basically what we did, we asked them to download an app that simulates like a DSLR camera on their phone, on their smartphone. And they were taking photographs with those apps to emulate the use of exposure in photography. I asked them to do 7 photographs with different characteristics, an architectural space, a close-up portrait of a person. And I got this picture, for instance. This is a picture in which with photography, we can see the damage of the Al-Hansa Mosque in Jerusalem. Or here you can see how the students play a lot with photography, just taking photograph of hamburgers or drinks using the out of focus effect. But actually, even though these were not heritage photographs, they were actually engaging with the idea of photography to transmit a message. And I think that that was quite important. Then here you see one house of one of my colleagues, Scott Bucking. We flown the drone there. And now we have a capstone group of students that will be working in the performance of this building. The students at home, they can use this software, photogrammetric software, to generate a three-dimensional point cloud of the site. Then from the point cloud at home, they can produce a three-dimensional mesh. From the three-dimensional mesh, they can produce texture models. So this is all the photograph, all the color of the photograph is projected into the texture models. And then they can produce auto-corrected images for the site context or the elevations of the building. So they are engaging with technology in a way to learn about these tools. This is an example of a hand record, a sketch that they did from home of an architectural element. Unfortunately, they couldn't go to their site, so we asked them to work from home. Here you see a field note that they did about, for instance, this is the room. I think this is the house, the living room of one of the students, and he used a field note to record it. And then this is the process data from the data we collected over the summer, and they produced an elevation drawing. These are some of the photographs they produced from their surroundings. You see photograph from Mississauga, photograph of this very beautiful house called the Hillary House. The Al-Hansa Mosque in Jerusalem, some photograph. I had a student that was in Japan while taking the course in Carleton, so she took some photos of the Meiji Jinju Shrine in Japan. I also gave a course in Colombia, also online, and the students in Colombia actually produced this record. This was kind of cool. We were working with a professor locally, and they produced this kind of, with their phones, they produced 360 images. And then if you go into the QR codes, you can open panoramic images of this street and this historic square in the city of Ibagué, and you can go from one side to the other. And then they use photogrammetry, and they store the 3D models into this platform called Sketchfab. Sketchfab is a three-dimensional, it's like Instagram for 3D models. And in Sketchfab, if you go to the QR code, you can see the three-dimensional model of the statues. I mean, this is not ideal, but this was a way for students to be able to link themselves, to engage, to feel, interested in heritage, also by learning from technology. And I wanted to show you these pictures because on Monday we had our first demo tutorial to students, and everybody showed up for the tutorial because people were really happy to engage for the first time with the students. And I find that we have to find a balance. So did we learn anything from all this pandemic? Well, certainly we learned how to do video conferencing, make webinars, use blended approach to teach, share data online, and use collaborative apps such as Poll Everywhere, the one I show you, Miro Board, and many others. So how can we go back to the past? So what's next? Are we transitioning back to class? Are we keeping the blended approaches? Are we using videos and discussing in a sync activity? Can we reach more people? how would the post-COVID classroom look like? I found this article in a random website and I found it really interesting. This is a kind of report on how to design learning spaces in the future. I invite you to have a look at it. It's kind of interesting. And then I found these UNESCO principles, 9 ideas for public action in the post-COVID world for education. And they have these 9 principles. But I would like to say that probably make free and open source technologies available to teachers and students. This is really important. I mean, we're very blessed in Carleton because we have a lot of support, so we can use tools which are commercial, but the university has made them available to us. We also need to protect domestic and international financing of public education. I think this is really important point too. And to situate Carleton, I think that we have to advance global solidarity to end the current levels of inequality in education. I think that Carleton, being a very blessed institution, should reach out to other institutions around the world and provide training, right? I think that this is a good idea. This is something that came out of the pandemic, is this inequality. Actually, I was teaching a little lecture for students in Guatemala in I think in spring, and many students had very much conflicts to connect on the internet with a good bandwidth. So we recorded the class and then they could watch it later on. And then we had some exchange using, other social tools like Instagram and etc. So I mean, we have to find ways to make education more affordable for people. I mean, and there are many other topics in this UNESCO thing. You have the link there if you're interested at looking. So at Carleton and our community, we need to talk about how we see education in the future and collaborate with others. I think that this is the main message. How are we making education more accessible, more interactive, more broader to our community at Carleton at large? And with this, I would like to conclude my presentation. I hope that it has been interesting to you. And I will put my email on the chat box if you would like to, ask questions. And here you see, this is one photo of my 3 interns over the summer, Abby, Valerie, and Hannah, that were really helpful in collecting a lot of the data and pre-process some of the data to be able to put it in the classroom. So here we see, and actually they work under the eCurious grants that the university has provided to us. And I think that was really useful. So I thank you all. Thank you again, my colleagues at FED, and especially Laura, Adam, and Alex for helping me with the lecture. So I'm looking forward to your questions. All the best.
Great, thank you so much, Dr. Santana.
Yeah, I hope Laura, it was not too short.
Oh no, that was perfect. So if you do have questions, you can ask them in the Q&A box. So we'll just wait to see if some more pop up there. But one question that you might be able to speak to is, so what has been the most difficult challenge teaching documentation of historic buildings from home?
Thank you, Laura. I think that basically, well, in our course, students have to engage with the physical condition of the buildings, right? And their values and their attributes. So it's a very physical course. So in the past, we will organize a number of site visits with them, and me and a teaching assistant will go and work with the instruments to take measurements with them. And then they will go back to the site and collect more measurements, etc. So that has been really challenging because, of course, you learn by doing, right? And then another aspect has been in the classroom, specifically when we have the tutorials, we have a lot of interaction, so a lot of questions and so on. So I have seen that, everybody keeps kind of their screens off. So it's I don't see their faces. By the way, the other time there was a student that was participating in some voluntary activity that we organized. And I say, oh, hi, nice meeting you. And he said, I'm sorry, I was your student, but I couldn't spot him because, of course, everything is online.
Great, thank you. So here's another question. So how can you evaluate the effectiveness of your online teaching in terms of developing skills? So that must be a little bit more challenging, eh?
It is really challenging. I mean, I have put some quiz online. I think that the quiz kind of talk to the students reviewing the videos, because I have seen that some of my colleagues, they go live, right? They go live for 3 hours and they talk. But when I started teaching historical recording, I had a meeting with the Educational Development Center of Carleton. And they said, well, great. I mean, if you want to do that, it's your option. But what happens if a student has very low bandwidth and they cannot listen to you? Let's say that your video, even though let's say that you cut off when you are lecturing, even though it's being recorded in Zoom or other platforms, what would happen there? So that's why they say maybe you want to do online recording. Okay, you record your classes, you have them online, and then you have this synchronous activity. And that's what I did. The first semester was a lot of work because I did everything by myself. Then I realized that the ITS in Carleton was offering the service of recording. So from the next semester, the winter, and this past fall semester, I have been with two great guys who have been recording my classes, and then I put them online. And then I have also have guest lecturers that have recorded the classes, so that has been really helpful. But developing the level of understanding how far students can go in their learning is very difficult, because of course there are also group assignments. So people are producing their group assignments, etc. Something funny that happened to me last year in the fall is that one student said that by downloading the Dataverse data, they got a virus. And I had to go everywhere. And yeah, that was not the case. I mean, the data in Dataverse is a PDF, it's a JPEG image, it's a 3D point clouds. They don't have viruses usually. Viruses are the Word files and all these other Windows products. So basically, yeah, it was, I mean, and another aspect that I think has been really challenging is the mental health of some of the students, because if some student is not there, we don't know if they're there. So it's been difficult to catch up with students. Yeah.
Great, thank you. So we have one question here. So setting the emotional factor aside, what is more cost effective, to restore a heritage building or demolish it and then rebuild an identical one from scratch using the digital data collected?
Oh my God, that's a great question, because actually it gives me a lot of room. So one thing that I always say, I don't believe in digital preservation. So if somebody tells me that because we did a digital record of a site, we are preserving the site, I say, that's not acceptable, because it's like animals. So if we have an animal with endangered species and we record the animal digital, right? And we have this digital replica of this animal, have we preserved the animal? No. I mean, we want to preserve the species. So it's the same with historic buildings. Historic buildings need to be preserved, and we need to use digital data to be able to understand how we can manage that impact of the environment and so on. And if we look at our climate crisis now, and then this is a question for everyone, would you believe that by demolishing a building, putting all this garbage into the ground, and then building something new, producing a lot of energy, is it really responsible in a climate crisis situation? I don't believe it. I believe that if we rehabilitate existing buildings and historic buildings, how many old buildings of like government complexes do we have out there in Ottawa that are abandoned? How many churches do we have that are underutilized? Can we focus on those buildings, maybe do some adaptive reuse, use them for new functions, and keep them. In that way, we're contributing to reduce the CO2 emissions from construction. And this seems to be more responsible, right? And most cost effective. So I think the cost is not only the parameter to evaluate. I think our responsibility as, as citizens to the climate, we need to take that responsibility. And I don't know if I answered that, Laura, all the.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you. Another question. So how do you decide on which heritage buildings to document and protect around the world?
Well, fortunately, I don't need to decide. I always work for different organizations. And for instance, the Getty Conservation Institute, who is one of our major associates, we work for them in a lot of projects. They always want to, so the Getty Foundation, the Getty Conservation Institute belongs to the Getty Trust. And the Getty Conservation Institute works worldwide to develop science. So we are doing a project now in Myanmar and in Bagan. And in Bagan, we have a lot of unreinforced brick structures that were affected by earthquakes. So the idea of the Getty by working in this project is produce science to do better seismic retrofit of this type of unreinforced masonry. So these are the kind of projects that we do. We always do projects from SIMS where we can develop science and we can provide opportunities to our students. We do not compete with the private sector because the private sector has their own clients and their own activities. We try to provide those skills to, emerging professionals so they can then make the leap to the private sector or the government sector of the non-for-profit. And also we want to develop science. So basically with the Getty, we have been working also with Chennai in India, Professor Arun Menon, who leads a group of experts on simulation of seismic unreinforced masonry. So we have done the full record of the temple. Then we did the three-dimensional model of the temple, and then the guys in Chennai imported this into a finite element modeling software, and then they can simulate the effects of the earthquake. So also we work a lot across with collaborations. Now, in terms of my class, I do select the sites I want to do. I work a lot with the City of Ottawa, with the NCC, with Heritage Ottawa and other organizations, and I ask for places, even colleagues of mine. And we have recorded from the most important Bytown Museum, one of the most important sites in Ottawa, as we have recorded a vernacular farm outside Ottawa that doesn't come to the federal listing. But I gather that also as an educator and experience for the students, we want them to record sites that might disappear or might be in neglect or might, whatever, but we keep a record also of those sites. And I think that's also something good for the students to do and us as professors.
Great. Okay, next question. So other than visual aspects and measurements, did you also collect and categorize any data such as detailed description of the site and the composition of building material?
So thank you for the question. Well, in the Historic Site Recording course, so I teach three courses, Historic Site Recording, Building Pathology, and Advanced Conservation in the graduate courses. So for the Historic Site Recording, they have to study the values. So they have to make a statement of significance. So they have to draft a paragraph saying what is important on the site, and then they have to define the character defining elements. So they do that type of assessment. Then they take some photograph of the condition of the building, but they don't categorize it. Then in the building pathology course, which happens after the Historic Site Recording, they do material characterization, they do building characterization, they identify deterioration patterns, and they make a kind of rehabilitation plan. Okay, so in that case, we go more in depth. So basically, in the Architectural Conservation and Sustainability program, both in engineering and in architecture, we are talking about the students in their third and fourth year. So third year, they do historic site recording, and fourth year, they do building pathology. And then if they go to graduate school, then they do the advanced conservation. In the advanced conservation, they develop a workflow on how to simulate an aspect of the building. So energy simulation, structural simulation, etc.
That's interesting. Next question. So what do you see the next big trends for architectural conservation and sustainability professionals in the next 10 plus years?
Thank you for the question, very relevant. I think that, so one is climate change, so climate adaptation. So we have to adapt to a climate that is changing, no doubt. I mean, it's not that we are going to be resilient or we are going to, these people that like saying mitigate. I don't believe in mitigate, we have to adapt. And we have to adapt our structures to what is coming, because it's coming. So I think that with other colleagues from other Canadian universities, we're actually developing a workshop called Just Transitions, Climate Adaptation in Heritage Education. And this is a workshop that we want to challenge the educational community on how we want to train our future engineers, architects, social sciences, historians, etc., on how we are going to adapt our heritage stock to climate. So that's one part. Another part is that with the trend of modern architecture and buildings like in Canada, if we look in the next 30 years, more than 70% of our building stock will be existing buildings. So many of these buildings are going to become part of our heritage. So these buildings are made out of reinforced concrete. They use curtain walls. They use glass. They use plastics. They use many other materials that were meant not to last. But we want to make them last because they are important for our heritage. So there we also have a lot of technical challenges on how we are going to, work on those new historic buildings from the modern era, from the 80s. We're going to be conserving buildings from the 80s, which are also important. Like the NAC in Ottawa, like the Brutalist building of the library or the Ottawa library that is going to be, they're going to evacuate, make a new building. So what is going to happen to the Brutalist building? Even if we look at our school, what are we going to do with the School of Architecture? It's also a Brutalist building we want to conserve, right?
Right. So I know it's been a challenge, or the pandemic has presented a challenge. But what has been the most interesting project you've worked on during the pandemic?
Well, during the pandemic, we were contacted by a colleague of mine, Christina Cameron, who is an emeritus professor in the University of Montreal. She has worked for World Heritage, for the World Heritage Convention for many years. She was the committee chair for a couple of years. She represented Canada overseas. And she's very concerned, among her many others, they are very concerned about the evolution of the World Heritage Convention becoming very political. So they developed this, our World Heritage Initiative. So over the last, in January, together with Christina and other colleagues and students of mine and colleagues all over the world, we organized 2 globinars. So we had globinars, we have 5 sessions across the world in different time zones, and we discussed the use of technology in monitoring and presenting different narratives in World Heritage sites around the world. We have developed a report on recommendations to the World Heritage Committee, and all this happened voluntarily from home. So this has been for me the most interesting project I have done this year, I have to say. And collaborating with people from China, Africa, Oceania, people from Australia. I have discovered so many colleagues and so many venues of opportunities that I would say that has been one of the most challenging, but most rewarding projects. And another project that has been also really rewarding is our continuing collaboration with the Getty Conservation Institute. They were very helpful in providing support to the continuous development of processing data. And we have been working with our colleagues in Los Angeles and in Italy, in Portugal, and in India on this project in Myanmar, and also with our colleagues in Myanmar. And the situation in Myanmar is really bad. So this has been really, really challenging from all ends, pandemic, the political situation of the country, and then collaborating. But this has allowed, to work with the students. And as a side note, also, I travel a lot before COVID. Now I haven't gone anywhere since March 2020. So I discovered I have seen Ottawa more than I have ever seen it in the last 9 years I've spent in this city. And this is because I decided to take my bike and did about 8,000 kilometers in Ottawa in year and a half.
Wow, that's fantastic. Got to see everything, eh?
Yeah, so I have discovered so many places. I mean, we're so blessed with so many places to see in Ottawa that we should enjoy them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Well, I think that's it for today. Thank you so much, Professor Santana. That was fantastic. Hope that everyone enjoyed the presentation along with the Q&A and gained some valuable insight and information. So I'm just going to pop up, you're most welcome. Just going to pop up a brief survey on the screen. So if you do have the time to fill it out, we would welcome and appreciate your feedback. So all answers are anonymous there. And as you can see on the screen as well, there's ways to stay connected with the Faculty of Engineering and Design. We hope that you keep well, so let's stay connected. And we hope to see you at our next Ingenious Talks online event, which is on November the 3rd. So alumni and individuals on our Ingenious Talks mailing list, please keep an eye open for that invitation. All right, thank you and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, all the best.